The Vince Marrow Effect is in full swing.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Happy Monday. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is year number 5 of covering U of L, year number 3 of hosting this show. And I want to take the time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. The Vince Marrow Effect is in full swing in the Derby City. Multiple commitments over the past couple of days. The number one prospect in Kentucky is a Cardinal. One of the top tight ends in the state of Florida is a Cardinal. But the fireworks might not be done just yet. A 4-star prospect is making his decision on Monday evening, and the Cardinals are firmly in the mix. Also, over the weekend, Louisville got a commitment from Nigel Williams, New Mexico defensive back transfer. He will be immediately eligible to play this fall. More on what he brings to the table coming up at the end of the show. But first, today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right. A lot of stuff to unpack on the show today, and all of it is regarding recruiting. Now, don't worry. We're just pausing the position previews for another episode, tight end preview and offensive line preview on the docket for later this week, but wanted to take a break from those previews and talk about the great job that Vince Marrow is doing. We knew that when he left Kentucky for Louisville that he was going to make a pretty large impact. The only question I felt like was going to be, well, how long is it going to take? How long is it going to take before that Vince Marrow effect gets into the full swing of things? Well, truthfully, it seems like that answer is not very long. Now, we have to be honest about Vince Marrow. And this is not really about Vince so much as it is the current state of college athletics with NIL, with the transfer portal, with how popular decommitting is becoming. Vince Marrow is not going to land you every prospect you go after. Just a fact. Vince Marrow is not going to keep every commit from staying committed. There will be some that decommit. That is a fact. Now, on the other side of this argument, Vince Marrow, or hiring Vince Marrow, I should say, showed that you were extremely serious about taking your program to the next level because he's one of the best recruiters in the country. Contrary to what some believe and what some use as a rebuttal, hiring Marrow's not going to be insignificant. He's going to make an impact. He's going to put you in the running for prospects that are the types of prospects that you really aren't that fully used to recruiting and being involved with. Sorry, it took a while to find what I wanted to say there. But, he raises your ceiling. He's going to make sure you're involved with the types of prospects you're not used to being involved with. And I feel like with Jarvis Strickland, he's sort of the type of prospect that the Louisville Cardinals just have not had much luck with. The highly ranked prospect from the state of Kentucky, outside of that Louisville metro area that Kentucky has just been able to have a really high success rate with recruiting. And if it's not them, it's Ohio State, it's Michigan, it's Penn State, it's an SEC school. Like it's very rarely the University of Louisville. But Jarvis Strickland was a name that we identified as a potential flip candidate. He was committed to Kentucky at the time. He could be the one that sort of kicks off this Vince Marrow era. And he decommitted from Kentucky a couple weeks ago. And just a couple days ago, announced that he was committing to the University of Louisville, creating some additional fireworks on the 4th of July. Jarvis Strickland, according to 247sports.com, the number one prospect in the state of Kentucky. 206 nationally, and 16th best offensive tackle. Now, his ranking is a little bit higher on 24/7 Sports versus what you would see in the composite, but he still is a 4-star composite recruit, which is really, really solid. Now, ended up committing to Kentucky when Morrow left. The rumors started swirling early on that he might be leaving to go a little bit over an hour down I-64 West, and that is the case. Strickland, 6'6", 294-pound offensive tackle, plays for Paducah Tillman High School down in that southwest corridor of the state of Kentucky, and has some pretty solid offers, of course. Michigan, you have North Carolina, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Tennessee. Vanderbilt has offered, of course, Louisville and Kentucky, Georgia Tech, Indiana. A lot of kind of geographically centered programs have offered Jarvis Strickland, but that's okay. Really solid prospect. And I think that the first thing for me that jumps off of the page is that this guy has legitimate NFL potential. That sort of gets watered down a little bit because how many times do we talk about a recruit and is thinking that a recruit and you're thinking that, yeah, this guy could go to the NFL. This guy could be a multiple year starter. And it just kind of loses its luster when you say that for almost every prospect. But I think it's the truth with Jarvis. He fits in that category of guys this large should not be able to move this fast. 6'6", almost 300 pounds, has exceptional footwork, and he's really quick. So even when he might lose off the edge, he's able to recover due to that quickness. I think he's able to get upfield and block really well, whether it's going to be zone scheme, power scheme, you name it. He has that versatility and that athleticism to be able to excel in a multitude of different situations. Now, I do think it's going to take some time. Strickland, I think, needs to get into a college program and in front of college coaches that will help him sort of refine that technique, which I believe that Coach Owens is going to be able to do. But the NFL upside is there. He projects as a multiple-year Power 4 starter, which is awesome to see. I think that with a year in strength and conditioning, getting his body right, getting his technique down, like he's going to be a really solid offensive tackle, whether that is protecting quarterback's blind side or being a solid right tackle. Regardless, I think that this guy, the potential just screams. It jumps off the page. Like, this is one of those recruits from Kentucky. And you always worry about how good Kentucky recruits are because the lack of competition. This is one of those guys that I really don't worry too much about that with. Jarvis Strickland is as good as advertised, and getting him into this program that has had pretty good offensive line coaching, it's awesome. And not to mention, one thing that I wanted to see with Vince Marrow was improved recruiting in the trenches, both on the offensive and defensive sides of the line. And being able to go out and get a player like Jarvis Strickland as like that first signature Vince Marrow recruiting victory, it's huge. And not to mention the optics level of being able to take a guy that was committed to your rival, the Kentucky Wildcats. So just win after win so far with Vince Marrow. And it's awesome to see the Cardinals continue to lock down not just the Louisville area, but the majority of the state of Kentucky. Look at the 2026 recruit rankings. Like, the Louisville Cardinals have most of the top guys in the state committed. So really awesome to see. But he wasn't the only player that committed to Louisville over the weekend. One of the top tight ends in the state of Florida has pledged his commitment to Jeff Brohm's program. We'll discuss what he brings to the table and more when we come back on this Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Card Nation, today's episode of the show is brought to you by Gametime. If you're like me and you decide at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family, whether it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands, that's exactly where Gametime comes into play. It's been my go-to way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress, even concerts as well. I'm going to the Creed concert on Wednesday, and I haven't bought tickets yet because I know that with Gametime, the prices of those tickets are going to go down the closer to that opening act. Sorry. Also, Gametime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB. So if you're a baseball fan, be sure to check out Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Card Nation, just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Hopefully everyone had a solid 4th of July. And continuing through the month of July as we get closer and closer to football season. Of course, position previews continuing with the next episode, but not done talking about recruiting just yet, as the Louisville Cardinals got a commitment from Jarvis Strickland on Friday. On Saturday, they got a commitment from Julius Miles, 6'6" tight end, weighing 210 pounds. This is a player that the Louisville Cardinals have been recruiting for quite some time. Even before he got ranked, the Louisville Cardinals were involved. 524th best player in the 24/7 Sports composite, one of the top 75, 60 players in the state of Florida, one of the best tight ends in the state of Florida. He made that official visit in late June to Louisville, which that official visit weekend has been incredible for the Louisville commitments, for the guys that were undecided but have since committed. Like, it has been a pretty successful weekend looking back on that. I asked Brian Smith, he's host of the portal on the Locked On Podcast Network, national football recruiting analyst for the Locked On Network, is mainly centered around the Florida recruiting. He said this: legit hooper. Unlike most basketball recruits, Julius Miles possesses the talent to take the same talent and adapt to college football. Miles has excellent hand-eye coordination at the catch point. That's his best attribute. Shields defenders with his size. Brohm will find ways to make him a red zone threat and red down weapon. Did I read that right? Yeah, red down weapon. So basically, at 6'6", 210 pounds, at Freeport High School, which is up in that panhandle, that northwest part of Florida, mainly used as a wide receiver, lined up out wide in the slot, but not really so much as an inline blocker at the tight end spot. So Louisville is trying to sort of make him into a full-time tight end, whether it's via the Jaleel Skinner role. Could you maybe use him like Marshawn Ford? I know that Louisville's starting to go after more and more athletic tight ends. Julius Miles chose the Cardinals over Syracuse and Florida State, which I think is a pretty solid recruiting victory. But multiple sport athlete, track and field star, doesn't just play basketball. He averaged 26 points a game and 11 rebounds. This guy is a star athlete. And how does that transition to the football field? Well, or how does that translate to the football field? Well, he's got that athleticism, ability to high point the football, 6'6". Who he kind of reminds me of, speaking of Syracuse, if you remember this guy, Oronde Gadsden, who's now a Los Angeles Charger, bolt up. Oronde Gadsden wasn't really known so much for his blocking, but he was such a mismatch at tight end that he's one of the best players at that position, not only in the conference, but in the country. And I think that that's sort of the mindset and the vision for Julius Miles. You got a guy that is uber athletic, does a great job of separating himself from opposing defensive backs, had 56 catches, 900 yards, and 10 touchdowns this past season. I mean, this is a guy that can outplay his ranking just because of the role that he's going to play. Like, Louisville is looking for that long-term solution at the tight end spot, and I love that the Cardinals went out and got the commitment from this young man because, I mean, you just watch him play, and he's not like a Jamari Johnson player. Jamari was 6'5", 270. Miles is 6'6", 210, more built like a wide receiver. But they are similar in the way that, they are too large for opposing defensive backs to cover, but they're too quick and fast for opposing linebackers to effectively cover. So this is a huge commitment. I'm really hoping that the Cardinals can hold on to Julius Miles' commitment because, I mean, this is an incredible prospect. But the fireworks might not be over. The Cardinals are still firmly in the mix for other prospects that could be making their decisions in a pretty short notice. Well, one, we know when that decision is going to arrive. It is tonight, Monday evening, 6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central. Jayden McGregory, ranked as the 400th best player in the country, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, 24th best athlete and number 4 player in the state of Iowa, comes from Des Moines, 6'2", 195 pounds. I think that the Louisville Cardinals are recruiting him to play safety. This past season, as a junior, 20 tackles, 13 passes broken up, and 3 interceptions. He also had over 500 yards of all-purpose yardage as a return man, as a receiver, and he was first-team All-State selection. 6'2", 195 pounds. He's choosing between the Minnesota Gophers, the Missouri Tigers, and the Louisville Cardinals. Now, it seems like various people around the Louisville area are confident that the Cardinals are going to land the 4-star athlete, but the Missouri side also seems to be pretty confident with this recruitment, so something to focus on if you are looking for some recruiting news. I'm not sure who's going to be broadcasting it, but a 4-star prospect is making his decision tonight. Hopefully you're listening to this before 6:30. This is going to air at probably like 2:30, depending on how quickly I can get it edited. But Jayden McGregory is one of those guys to where he fits the mold of what the Louisville coaching staff is looking for. Like the trend of guys, or the trend that, Louisville is kind of going with in recruiting those secondary guys, is they want versatility. They want size. Like McGregory is 6'2", plays as a safety, but I think that there's a couple of different ways that you can deploy him. Potentially outside the linebacker in coverage. Who knows? That has been a pretty popular thing. Get a safety into Louisville and convert them into a linebacker. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen here, but it's happened multiple times. Now, I think most of that was with the Scott Satterfield regime, so going to be interesting to see how that translates over with the Brohm era. But overall, like I said, kind of tying back to the original point that the Vince Marrow effect is in full swing. Like you are seeing the early impact and just sort of the opening part of what Vince Marrow can do. And just goes to reiterate that even though NIL and the portal and this new era of college sports have maybe taken away a little bit of a significance for a guy who's in a role like Vince Marrow, but it's not completely insignificant because he does a great job of forming those relationships, great liaison to the pros. I mean, Vince Marrow is an asset for any program that he's with, and I'm glad that Louisville has him in that off the field role that he can just, specifically focus on just recruiting. So this is obviously some great news that we've gotten. More potential great news on the horizon. But let's take a step back from high school recruiting and focus on the portal yet, because Louisville apparently wasn't done adding to the roster. Nigel Williams is joining the Louisville secondary. What does he bring to the table? And more we'll discuss when we come back on this Monday edition of the show. Card Nation, just a reminder, 17 episodes on the docket for this month of July. We've already had 4 episodes. This is episode number 5. I don't know if there's going to be 2 or 3 more this week, but we will have the tight end preview. We will have the offensive line preview, and maybe more, depending on what happens. So just a reminder there, be sure to like, follow on social media. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page. We are on the road to 5K. Any subscription, comment, like on the video is definitely appreciated. But to conclude the show today, we got to go back to the portal. And I wasn't really paying attention to the portal with it being July and most of the roster is finalized. But apparently the Louisville Cardinals felt the need to go out and bring in another body to the secondary. Now, Nigel Williams is a player that it's not like we haven't heard of. Like if you follow football recruiting, whether it's the portal or high school recruiting, like you've heard this name because he was one of the last names that Louisville was involved with in that spring. Nigel Williams spent 4 seasons at Northwestern, couldn't really crack into the rotation, had 3 tackles in 2022, but that's it. The 5'11" native of Richmond, Virginia, then transferred to New Mexico, where, of course, he had a career season, 58 total tackles, 2 pass deflections, and 1 forced fumble. What does this tell us about the secondary for Louisville? I think that it's just a matter of adding depth. I don't think it's something that reveals that the Cardinals don't have any confidence in the secondary, because I'm not sure that Nigel Williams is a guy that's going to be able to come in and be a starter. At 5'11", he's a little bit undersized for a cornerback. But I do think he's going to be able to play in the slot. I think he's going to be able to play on special teams. And don't get it twisted. Special teams was huge for the Louisville Cardinals last year. It might have been the reason why they beat Georgia Tech. That blocked field goal. How many blocked field goals did they have last year? Nigel Williams could be a player that can affect the game in multiple ways. He is athletic for being 5'11", which I think is going to, compensate a little bit for that lack of height. Plays with that tenacity, a ton of effort, high motor guy that, will contend. Even if he gets beat, he's going in with 100% effort. Veteran guy with 1 year of eligibility. I think 1 year of eligibility remaining, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 2. But 2 at the most. I think he's going to be able to factor into the depth equation, and something we've seen from Jeff Brohm since he's gotten to Louisville is that not many scholarships go unused. Like not many spots go unfilled. Even if it doesn't really make sense for the Cardinals to go out and grab a guy at a position that has a ton of mouths to feed already, he does so to give himself or to give his program some insurance. What have we seen the past couple of years? And I hate that this is the case. And I'm hoping that this trend reverses, but each of the past 2 seasons, right before the year, 2 significant injuries. 2023, it was MJ Griffin in the secondary. 2024, it was Colin Lacey. That's not to say that there's a problem going on at Louisville. Football is a 100% contact sport. It is a 100% injury sport. So you have to give yourself as much quality depth as you can. And I think that this is where Nigel Williams comes into play. Is that you already don't have you don't have an abundance of depth at the cornerback position. You have, Rodney Johnson, who, by the way, the transfer from Southern University, I've heard some really good things about in spring and summer. Like, I think he's going to be a really good player in the ACC. Ramon Mosby, is he a rising sophomore? He might be a redshirt freshman, but he had a really good bowl game against Washington. I think he's going to be a player, the native of Atlanta. He's going to be able to come in and I think maybe play opposite of Rodney Johnson. You've got some other guys also in the mix transferring in from some non-power 4 Louisville schools that I think are going to play. Jabari Mack is one of them, just continuing down the line. So With Nigel Williams, I don't think that this is really any much more than a depth add. Like, hey, we want to make sure that in the event that an injury does happen, let's get as much depth as we can because there's so much potential with this season. Like, your offense is going to be really, really good. You're going to have a great offense. The schedule is opportunistic. Like, you have a chance to get some really signature victories while also picking up a good amount of victories and, hey, maybe getting to your first playoff in program history. But to do that, you got to stay healthy. And even if you can't stay healthy, it's got to be next man up mentality. You've got to have some other players step in and be able to rise up and not let that drop off be significant. So with Nigel Williams, 58 tackles, I think he's shown that he can obviously get involved with defending the run. One of the only questions, or I'm sorry, the main question that I do have is how is that skill set and that production going to translate to the Power Four? Of course, playing at New Mexico is much, much different than playing for the University of Louisville. He wasn't able to get much playing time at Northwestern in any of those 4 seasons he played there. So now going back to the Power Four, what's that role going to look like? Is he going to be at the back end of the rotation? Is he going to be able to play his way into the 2 deep? I don't think so, but of course, that's why you have fall camp. I think that where you could see him play the most. Sorry, I can't speak today. I think that Nigel Williams could be playing on special teams. The Cardinals are going to have some pretty solid return men back there. I think that Nigel Williams could factor into, playing with the punt team, on the kick return team, the kickoff team, you name it. Does have that athleticism and that tenacity. Also plays with a decent amount of speed as well. So I'm okay with this. I mean, anyone that Jeff Brohm feels like can come in and fill a role for his program, I'm fine with. I think it's pretty interesting that this addition was made in July. So I'm hoping that that's not an indication of how they feel about the secondary. I do think it's probably, door number 2, which is adding as much depth as you can so you can maximize and take advantage of the 2025 campaign. But that is going to wrap up this Monday edition of the show. Some more guests coming up this week to help me finish the offensive previews, tight end previews with From the Pink Seats. Vince Lococo is coming up on Tuesday. We're going to have Keith Artov back on later this week to preview the offensive line as we continue through this month of July. That is going to wrap up the show today. Be sure to hit that like button, comment, let me know your thoughts, share, and definitely hit that YouTube subscribe button. That's going to wrap up this Monday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.